Okay boys, so finally doing another base video, which a lot of people have been asking for, but I just haven't really been doing much building, so I hadn't gotten around to it. But I finally spent some time. I really wanted something that could just consistently be an easy build, nothing very complicated, but just a solid all-round base that gives you pretty much everything you need in the current meta of Rust. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to build, I wanted to do something that was affordable, but not so affordable that you would lose the things that you need in a good base nowadays. Now, there's nothing extremely intricate with this base. It just has a solid wide gap shooting floor, good peaks, and a solid main loot room that I aim to just be comfortable to live in. I honestly don't mind that much about making things very hard to raid anymore. If you're going to get offline, you're going to get offline. Obviously, adding bunkers can make that a bit more expensive, but in reality, I would just rather an enjoyable experience when I'm playing the wipe and an ease of access to all my loot when I need it. So with that explained, it runs obviously with a main TC and two externals. Those are both disconnectable, so if your main TC does get raided, you can obviously just disconnect those externals and place a new one down. It has everything that I think a base nowadays needs, which is obviously a wide gap shooting floor, shoots from the outside up, meaning you have multiple routes to go from the outside of your base up into the peaks if you need to in the middle of a raid. And obviously something I always go for if you've seen my builds is a nice small compact compound that makes the base look more raidable than something with a bigger compound. As with a lot of people, my group and the people I play with's aim is always to get an online if we can because of how fun onlines are. But the bigger your base is, the less likely that is to happen. So I always like sacrificing a bit of protection for a higher chance of getting raided, which obviously comes in the form of your base looking a bit smaller and less defendable. Now, as for the starter, I wanted something that was open, but also had a bit of defendability in case a early raid happens, which a lot of the time will happen on populated servers if there's groups around. Now, something I've always done with my base build videos is I leave a lot open for you guys to work out when you build the base. I'll obviously leave a code for you guys to go look at the base, and there's a lot that you can change on how you lay out rooms and different floors, and I recommend that you play around with that to fit what you and your group are looking for. A perfect example of that is these peaks. I've been playing around with the idea of ramp peaks. I haven't really done it previously and I haven't had an online while using them yet, so I don't know how effective they are really and how nice they are when defending. So this is something that I would recommend playing around with depending on if you've had experiences where they've worked or they haven't. Now, as for the main loot room, again, it is nothing insane and it's nothing that's going to keep offliners out of your main loot. But something I've aimed for the more hours that I've put into Rust is less pain in the ass and more just ease of access to my main loot. Now that obviously comes at the risk of it being easier to hit by raiders, but if I'm online then the likelihood of them getting it is pretty low, and if I'm offline, it doesn't matter whether you have bunkers or not in my opinion. If a raider wants to get to it, they'll get to it while you're sleeping. Now that we've pretty much covered everything, we'll jump into the starter and the build itself. So it is just a simple 1x2 honeycombed kind of starter that will have one entrance at the bottom and two up at the top, also having two windows that can give you views on both sides of your base to defend those early raids like I talked about. Now for these triangle floors, obviously they can be soft picked from below until you get your outer core done, so those would be something I would upgrade to sheet metal pretty early on to make sure that doesn't happen. So with that, you've pretty much got your starter, which is somewhat defendable. I would always recommend that you have a flank base or two outside with some guns in it if you have that stuff at that time, but this is enough for what you'll probably need early on, depending on how quickly you can upgrade. Next thing I would start working on is getting your externals sorted. So if there are any grubs running around, they don't just TC grief your build spot and prevent you from getting your main down. Now, if you've done any multi-TCing before, this will be pretty simple. I'm just going to use symmetry, so it's done on both sides, so I don't have to repeat it and make the video a whole lot longer. But it is 9 squares out, with half moons all the way back in, ending with a square. Once you've done that, you can get rid of all the triangle foundations leading back in and start sealing up the loot room on your second level. Now, you obviously need to do that on both sides. As I said, I'm using symmetry on this build server, which does it for me. But once you've done that on both sides, you then want to finish the outer footprint for your peak downs. Then you can start doing your build out to your disconnectable TCs, which will be a square with 2 triangles on each side, which will end up being your wide gap shooting floor, and then also another 3 triangles on the end, which will be your little outhouse leaving your compound, which will also have windows, making sure you can't get grubbed by any little DBs waiting outside. Add this frame and delete the foundation, and then you do 1 half moon out, and a square, and 3 more triangles, which will be where your TC goes. Delete those 4 triangles and then start on where your TC will go. This should be upgraded to sheet metal as quickly as you can, including these 2 half walls which you have to do for the stability of the disconnectable. After you've finished with that, you can then add the frames which make the disconnectable work, which are a square from the main base and then triangles from each side. Now, my next step would be to finish all the external stuff for the compound so you could get that done and have large furnace pumping. So on both your exits, you'll be doing 3 squares out with half moons back, and then a raised square with 3 low triangles all the way around it. This will give you your outhouse and turret placements, which are very overpowered in an online raid. So once you've done that on both sides, you'll have your 4 exits of compound done. Then we'll do the 4 build outs that will also be a part of your wide gap shooting floor, which is a triangle off the square with 3 squares out, and then a half moon back, removing those 2 triangles and adding a raised triangle on the end. 2 walls, a roof, and a frame. I didn't add that here, but that's what I add later. Repeat that on both sides. It will give you a total of 4 of these build outs. Once you've done that, I would then do your compound, which is a total of 12 wood walls placed as I show here. With that, your compound will be complete. You obviously just need deployables, but I'll show those in a little bit. Now, don't mind the change of scenery here. I had a bit of trouble with the build server I was using, so I swapped to a different one. But right here, I will just show a little bit of upgrading as well that I would do once I have compound down and large furnace running. Now, for the outer layer, there'll be 2 exits, so these are done like this on the triangle ends, and the rest are just walls all the way around. Your chutes will be placed on top of those exits, as you can see here, and these will go all the way up to your shooting floor. And the bedrooms on the outside will require a frame on each side and walls in between. Then we'd start doing the frames for the externals, which I would try and get done very quickly because these will be decaying until you connect them to the main TC. So it just takes 2 frames on each side, aiming in towards the base. And then you start doing the squares here, which will be used for your outer peak bedrooms. Add some half walls on the front and the right side. Place the stairs where the bed will go and the half wall for the boxes. And then something you will need to keep in mind, the frames going up will need to go down first, then you connect the frame through the middle. If you do it the other way around, it will not allow you to place the frames going upwards. So you need to make sure you keep that in mind. And this will obviously need to be done on both sides of the base. Then you can add the frames on the side that your disconnectable TC exit is, and place 1 upgraded square on the top. And obviously repeat that on the other side exactly the same way. Once you've done that, you can go to the other exit, which is not the TC side, and do your connection as well, which will be needed to stop that exit decaying. Do that on both sides. And with that, all the framing you need to do for now will be done. And now we can move on to the peaks level and doing the shooting floor. Now with these frames, just make sure that you rotate them the correct way so they lock onto the wall next to them and cover that gap, like so. So with the ramp peak downs, we're going to need to place 3 squares on the inside, all going off the external TC. Now you're going to wall off this square here and place an upgraded sheet metal ramp on the inside, raised, and then seal it off. Go to the other side, and then you're going to place a lower ramp on the inside, upgrade that to sheet metal, and that will now hold its position once you get rid of the square. Now you're going to do the same thing off the squares that are above the bedrooms. Then you can remove all these squares and the ramps will stay there themselves, and then add 3 frames on both sides that go all the way up, and they will later be upgraded to sheet metal or straight away depending on what you have at hand. Then you'll add a triangle to both of those, sealing up the peaks. And once you've done that, you just need to repeat it on the other side. Now, once you've done that, you can start finishing up that floor, which will lead to the main loot once you add your ladder hatches. Make sure these frames are whatever quality the 2 walls are and have them rotated the right way to seal off that gap, again, like we did on the outside. Now, as the top of this level will be the bottom of the main loot room, you can upgrade this to high qual straight away or upgrade it later when you have the high qual available. Now we're going to add these frames here that will go off the other frames on the left hand side that we've done in sheet metal, which will be going off the external TC part of the base, not the main TC part of the base. Once you do that, you're just going to add a triangle, a square and a triangle on both sides to finish sealing that up. And then you're going to add a square coming off the main TC part of the base, which will look a little weird, but it's just how you seal up that gap that is made by multi-TCing a base. And then all you need is 2 ladder hatches and you've sealed off that level. Now, to finish up the shooting floor, we just need to add another level of frames to all of the existing frames we've already set up and off the squares that have the ramps on them. Do that all the way around and then add your floors and you've almost finished your shooting floor. Now once you've completed that, it's time to move on to the main loot room. So you'll be adding walls just as I do here, making sure that you place them the right way around so it covers all the gaps that are created by the multi-TC. As you can see here, you just have to rotate it what would normally be the wrong way if you were trying to do honeycomb, but that creates that little connection point that covers the multi-TC gap. Now you might be tempted to upgrade this stuff to high qual as it is your main loot room, but I don't like doing that because then any raiders or anyone that's looking to raid your base can see from the outside just by looking through your shooting floor where your main loot is probably going to be located, which I just don't like having. Now you can have multiple things placed in these corners, whether it be furnaces or lockers, it doesn't really matter. I, just as an example, put batteries here, but if you want to deviate kind of from the build just so other people that maybe have seen the video don't know exactly where your batteries are, I recommend you do that. Now I didn't do it when I was building it here, but what I would probably do is change these loot rooms to have windows instead of door frames, just because having all these extra garage doors don't really add anything when you can just have windows instead and save all those garage doors for somewhere else on your base. Now, same thing as below, you need to do your frames off the multi-TC side of the base, not the main TC side of the base. These ones you can do in stone, it doesn't really matter, but I just did it in stone in this situation. Now once you're done finishing up that main loot room, you can start adding your frames and sealing up your shooting floor, as well as adding your entrances up to the roof. Now, once you fully seal up the roof with the extra windows and stuff, this jump up peak becomes kind of useless, but you're not immediately going to have that part of the base added all the time. So I like still having the option of this jump up peak, even though it gets sealed in later. It just gives you that extra security until you completely finish the roof. Now at this point, the base is pretty much done. I'm just going to run through some of the deployables where I would probably place turrets, and obviously sealing up all the compound with barricades and doors. So with that, we pretty much come to the end of the build. If you guys enjoyed it and want to see more of this kind of stuff from me, just hit that like button, leave a comment below and tell me. It really helps me know what you guys are enjoying. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments and I'll get to them as quickly as I can. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed.